So I'm at this community celebration with a bunch of painters, and this is my entry into the painting competition. If you want to see how I painted it, with a variety of water-soluble markers, crayons, and pencils, you're in the right place. The competition was to paint something at this park. I'd only been here a couple of times, but I knew I wanted to capture the hometown feel with this softball field and that beautiful mountain backdrop. I was careful to get the sky nice and smooth with the watercolor pencil, but then I started to use some watercolor markers for the trees and grass. It looks like a little kid is drawing this, and I'll admit it is sloppy. But don't worry, there's a method to this madness. This first pass is just to establish the local colors and the composition. I'll refine it with the subsequent layers. I'm using two different brands of watercolor markers here. One of them I like a lot, the other not so much. The light green was a Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer marker. I really like the colors that come in, but they don't seem to blend out as well, even though this watercolor canvas is coated with a gesso, and that should help the colors to not absorb into the canvas as much, which would help things blend better. It's not quite enough on this hot day. After the marks dried on the canvas, it's hard to blend the lines out with the water at this brand. This darker green is from the Winsor and Newton Pro Marker line, and as you can see, it's blending out a lot better. So today I prefer the Winsor and Newton markers. The previous underlayer will still give some good texture though, so it will work out fine. Painting grass and trees requires a lot of different shades and values, as well as different colors, in order to look realistic. Rarely is the grass a uniform flat green, so I'll also be adding some Neocolor pastels to it a bit later to get that look I'm hoping for. I'm using my homemade sketch box on a tripod as I sit in this park, but sometimes I find it easier to draw my lap, so I do a little bit of both. These look like regular crayons, but they're Neocolor 2 water-soluble wax pastels. They come in a lot of colors, and I don't always use them, but I felt like using them today. I have so many art supplies that I picked up over the years that I kind of make it a point to alternate back and forth between them. Partially as a challenge, but mostly because using different types of mediums is my way of sparking creativity. I'm not saying what types of art supplies are the best, but I like these well enough that I keep returning to them. I do like the water-soluble mediums the best though, mostly because they're cleaner and odorless. They dry quickly and are super portable. The water-soluble pencils, markers, and pastels work well with each other too, and I'm using all three types on this painting. The markers lay down the most saturated pigment, so I find it's the best way to establish the darkest darks. But with water, I can blend them out and even lift them back off of the surface, depending on my needs. The pencils are probably the most versatile though. They have the widest range of colors and are arguably the easiest to control. With all of these though, don't expect it to have it look like a traditional watercolor painting. I prefer to call these water-soluble pencils rather than watercolor pencils, because if you try to make them look like traditional watercolors, you'll be frustrated. But if you think of them as colored pencils that blend really well with water, you'll find that they have a look and feel that is completely unique. I especially like the different types of textures you can get with these. With practice, you'll also learn that different brushes and different amounts of water produces different looks as well. Controlling the amount of water you use is pretty important. Once I moved past that messy underpainting stage, I use less and less water on the brush. Sometimes the brush is barely damp. It's a lot easier to control that way. Using less water also means things dry more quickly, especially on a hot day like this. I like that though, because it's easier to do subsequent layers. I like to use different colors in the layers. It makes for an interesting visual color texture. Using that pink isn't the first thing you would think of when painting a tree, but it's a pretty good way to break up that green with a complementary color. I often introduce a sky blue in my trees too, because in a way the leaves can reflect some of that color of the sky. It also visually pushes some of the trees back into the distance, because things in the distance often look bluer and grayer because of the atmosphere. Similarly, the grass in the distance is lighter in value than the grass up close. That's why I'm adding some of this yellow. That way the grass field looks like it extends into the distance, rather than just looks like a vertical wall of green. These pastels can be pretty opaque, especially if you leave them dry. I often do that in the later stages of a painting. One of the reasons I use this tiny brush is because it's more or less guaranteed to hold less water. Using less water makes sure I don't lose the opaque colors, but allows me to blend out some of those edges to make the marks look softer. That's another trick to help make things appear they are further back. Softer lines and edges. Crisp, hard edges make things look closer, like on that sign, and softer lines make them appear further back. At this point, I am thankful for that pole. It's providing the only shade available in the middle of this field. The bright sun is making better shadows than I had earlier too, when it was more overcast. So it's a good reminder that I need to add some more darks to one side of those trees to help them look less flat. Other than that, I'm sort of just fiddling at this point. But I feel like I need to emphasize that my approach to painting and sketching changes all the time. I love trying new materials and new techniques. I don't want any of you to think that you have to do it like I do. But if I've given you some ideas to potentially try, then great. But don't be afraid of trying your own techniques. Anyway, I still need to finish that sign. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to tackle the dark backgrounds to the white numbers and letters on that sign. The sign is just too small to put in every detail, nor did I have enough time. So I just blocked in the black colors with a water-soluble pencil, and then used the brush to clean up the edges. Then I broke out the Posca pen for the whites. The Posca pen is an acrylic paint in pen form. This one has a brush-like tip, and I like the brush for most things, but I kind of wish I had one with a fine point nib on it for this sign. I guess that means I'm heading back to the art store soon. Don't tell my wife. I probably have way too many art supplies as it is. Oh well, I guess that's why I keep my day job, to pay for the art supplies. I also used the white to put some snow on that mountain. Even though it's almost July, the top of the mountain is close to 11,000 feet in elevation, so it's much cooler up there than it is down here. That's mostly why I go to the mountains a lot in my videos, to get out of the heat of the summer. Anyway, this is how I try to use up my art supplies, and have a little fun getting outside and painting. I like to share my experiences with you. I'm trying to post twice a month, so subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one, and if you haven't watched this next video, check it out.